Welcome to the Einstein Foundation Award. We would have loved to welcome you in Berlin in person tonight, but due to the acute pandemic situation just in Germany right now, we had to turn to a live stream. The ceremony will be postponed to next year, so you will have the chance to see everybody next year in autumn, hopefully. Nevertheless, tonight is going to be a very special evening because it is the first time ever that a completely new international prize is being awarded for a topic that perhaps is the most important in science. The people you will see tonight are not being honored for fantastic breakthroughs or glorious scientific results, but they are honored for their commitment in improving the quality of research. And before we go into detail about the awardees, I would like to focus on the idea behind this prize, behind this new award. And I'm very happy to welcome the chair of the Einstein Foundation Berlin, Rennert. Hello, Mr. Rennert.
Good evening.
Can you tell us something about how this prize, how this award came into being? Who initiated it?
Well, the Einstein Foundation is a foundation that is dedicated to furthering scientific excellence for Berlin and in Berlin and for people and structurally in Berlin. But of course, we do address other things as well. A couple of years ago, in 2019, as a matter of fact, the Damp Foundation, together with Senator Zöllner and others, Günter Stock among them, initiated and launched a prize which was made possible by a very generous donation by the founder of the Damp Foundation, that is Dr. Wibben. And they all aimed to do the following. They wanted to further the possibility of advancing fundamentally the quality of research findings and systems. It is a thing that has not been addressed with prizes up to now, and I think we are doing actually pioneer work in this case because it has become more and more important. Especially, we have all noticed that in the pandemic we are just all experiencing. We have all noticed that that is something which has to be addressed. We have to look at the systems, we have to look at the quality of research, but we also have to gain access to the systems and the reliability and the ways people do research and publicize.
You just mentioned very briefly the funder. Who is funding this research and who is funding this award?
The award is funded by the Damp Foundation. We, of course, are also helped by by Berlin itself, the town of Berlin and the country of Berlin. Many don't know that that is a town as well as a country. And we also are very thankful to a lot of people who have helped us along the way, among them a very, very prestigious jury, which I'm sure will be going into the names of the jury and the very prestigious institutions they represent.
And who is this jury? Who is there in there?
Well, if I wanted to read them all, I will. But I would love to, as a matter of fact, because it's very, very marvelous to have all these people working with us. I'll begin with the jury president, who will be on the program later on today. That's Dieter Imboden, will be from the ETH Zurich, and the president of the Swiss National Science Foundation. And then we have the president of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States, Marshall McNutt, the executive director of the Royal Society in England, Julie Maxton, Great Britain, the winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics, Al Roth, science historian Lorraine Daston, neuroscientist Alistair Buckham, philosophers Moshe Halbertal and Susan Neiman, computer scientist Michael Krosnar, psychologist Dorothy Bishop, economist Lena Lavinas and Eduard Miguel, a psycholinguist Susie Stiles, and World Bank social scientist Soazik Eliz Van Sonne. So it goes all through the world and all through the disciplines.
It's quite an impressive list. And who are the supporters of this award?
Well, we are supported by a lot of people, actually, among them, of course, the jury, and as well as the Nature, the scientific publication, the Nature, Magdalena Skipper, who is the chief executive there, and the Max Planck Institutes, and the Quest Foundation, which is seated in the Charité in Berlin, as well as, of course, the people working with these institutions and all these entities. We also, of course, and I don't want to forget that for a second, as a matter of fact, are the people in this office who have been working tirelessly, actually, towards the President's event, which sadly has not come to pass.
Thank you, Mr. Rennert. You just mentioned Nature. The Nature Publishing Group has been supporting this award from the very beginning, especially in raising international awareness. And so I'm very honored to have Magdalena Skipper as our next speaker. She is editor-in-chief of Nature. And she herself has been very active in promoting research quality. And Magdalena Skipper is a member of the Einstein Foundation Award Committee.
Research quality and robustness are two essential aspects of science and scholarly pursuit. They're both fundamental to the credibility of research and those who engage in it. For many years now, we at Nature and the other journals of the Nature portfolio have worked together with the research community to offer tools with which good research practice can be transparently communicated. This support encompasses the sharing of data, code, key aspects of methodology and whole protocols, and encouraging our authors to share preprints of the work they submit to us. Increasingly, we work to support our authors to appropriately give credit to all collaborators, with a wider aim to make research more inclusive and more equitable. In our eyes, robust research is research that has also been robustly evaluated. And to this end, we have, over the years, made our own processes more transparent, for example, by publishing peer review reports and thanking our referees by name. While no one would argue that research quality and robustness are important, unfortunately, all too often, these attributes are simply taken for granted. Calls for greater emphasis and recognition of these essential aspects of research are growing in numbers, and rightly so. Still, there continue to be too few opportunities to celebrate and reward individuals, organizations, or even projects that aim to enhance quality of research. It is therefore my enormous pleasure to be associated with the Einstein Foundation's Award for Promoting Quality in Research. It has been a real privilege to advise on the award from its very inception, and I am particularly excited that there are 3 award categories, one for researchers, one for institutions, and one specifically for early career researchers. That we need to shine a spotlight on individuals goes without saying. They are the ones who are responsible for the change on the ground. Highlighting the efforts of early career researchers is especially important because they, especially at this stage in their professional life, need the support and recognition. And because it is their efforts that will shape how research practice will evolve in the future. But everyone within research ecosystem has a role to play, and earlier I described how we at Nature and the Nature portfolio try to play our part. There also is a fundamental opportunity for research institutions here, which is why it is so important that the Einstein Foundation Award recognizes them also. The partnership with the Einstein Foundation to create this award is very important to us at Nature. It's one additional way for us to support research quality. I am now very much looking forward to today's ceremony and cannot wait to hear from the 2021 winners of all categories. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Skipper. The idea to promote quality in research is shared by a number of international organizations, and one of those is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The next speaker is the co-chair and trustee of this foundation, Melinda Gates.
Hello, everyone, and thank you all, especially Martine Rennert and Dieter Imboden, and the award jury for welcoming me to this event. And most importantly, thank you for coming together to honor a group of remarkable people who don't always command the spotlight, but deserve recognition. COVID-19 was a new virus spreading within and between countries in weeks. It represented a greater danger to our health, our economies, and our daily lives than most of us had ever experienced. We, of course, look to experienced doctors and nurses and frontline workers. We look to governments and foundations and on-the-ground organizations to fund responses and to distribute supplies. And each of us did our part to wear masks, socially distance, and slow the virus's spread. But when it came to protecting ourselves from COVID-19 over the long term, the world's hopes rested on women and men like those we honor today. The researchers who are in laboratories, universities, and companies who are working around the clock to develop a safe and effective vaccine in record time and save countless lives. Thankfully, researchers here in Germany and around the world had laid the groundwork for mRNA vaccines. They spent decades building a meticulous and expansive body of research, fighting for funding and against skepticism. And today, humanity is safer and healthier because of them. Indeed, the story of the global response to COVID-19, Germany wrote more than a few chapters. This is where Ingmar discovered in the late 1990s that RNA could be stabilized and used in the development of vaccines. Germany is where Urshahin and Özlem Türeci built BioNTech, a leading player in the development of one of the world's first COVID-19 vaccines. And Germany's contributions to science aren't limited to biomedicine. We're also inspired by Klaus Hasselmann, who was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics this year for his groundbreaking methods in modeling climate change. It's that spirit of innovation, that drive to discover, that the Einstein Foundation Award for Promoting Quality in Research celebrates. And you're not just recognizing those who fight disease or protect the planet, but importantly, those who elevate the field of research itself. Because with stronger methods, greater rigor, and more transparency, we will bring future breakthroughs even closer. Now, of course, even the proudest researchers would admit that they cannot succeed on their own. Research needs institutional support. It needs funding, it needs space for long-term thinking, collaboration, and bold risk-taking. Because scientific miracles like mRNA vaccines don't happen overnight. If we want to be prepared for the next global crisis, whatever it might be, we need to start building that foundation right now. In Germany, the formation of a new government marks an opportunity to continue building on your country's remarkable legacy of scientific innovation and discovery. It's a chance to strengthen and deepen partnerships between government, business, and science to advance the team science that we honor today. Because now's the time for us to think about who else could be on our teams if we just open our doors a little bit wider. I'm encouraged that the Einstein Prize has a special focus on gender equality and diversity in the sciences. It is literally written into your charter. And I know we can all do more to strengthen research and collaboration, not just in the places we call home, but throughout the entire world. It's a goal our foundation shares. we've long focused our funding and programmatic efforts on low and middle income countries, and the COVID-19 pandemic made even clearer the urgency of accelerating this work. Right now, we're seeing persistent global inequity in terms of access to vaccines, and that leaves us all more vulnerable. But we've also seen examples of extraordinary research in unexpected places, like genomic sequencing of COVID-19 variants that was happening and is happening in South Africa. It's a reminder that there are brilliant people everywhere, laying the groundwork to tackle the next global challenge. And if we want to truly advance the field of research, we must make sure we're seeking out the best ideas, the best thinkers around the world, and joining them as we move forward together. So thank you again for launching these awards at such an important time for our research and for our world. And congratulations to this year's winners. I can't wait to see all the good you do for your field and for all of us.
Thank you, Mrs. French-Gates. And now it is my pleasure to welcome two members of the jury. The Vice President of the jury is Dorothy Bishop. She is a professor of developmental neuropsychology at the University of Oxford and is being chair of the advisory board of the UK Reproducibility Network and a founder member of Reproducing Research Oxford. And the president of the jury is Dieter Imboden. He's a professor emeritus at the ETH Zurich and the former president of the Research Council of the Swiss National Science Foundation. Welcome, Mrs. Bishop, and welcome, Mr. Imboden. Mrs. Bishop, when you first heard about this prize, this award, what made you decide, yes, I want to be part of the jury?
Oh, it was a very easy decision because it was really just reflecting everything I had been focused on for the past 5 or 6 years. I had really got more and more interested in the importance of improving science itself, and the fact that we're actually often working against forces and pressures that make it difficult for people to do good research. One of the factors that I think has led to problems in many areas of research are institutional pressures and the wrong sorts of incentives. And you talk to young people and they say, well, if I do research really carefully and rigorously, that's career suicide because other people are racing ahead to get papers out and so on. And they're going to sort of get ahead of me and they cut corners. And so to have a prize that actually shows that important people really value research that's done carefully, collaboratively, not so much the sort of just breakneck speed to get something out, but really doing research in a way that will generate valuable results, which, as was said by Melinda Gates, is so important in this particular pandemic. So it was, for me, what we call a no-brainer. It was just the right prize at the right time, as far as I was concerned.
Mr. Imboden, from your view, what are the main objectives of this award?
It has been said before that probably this is one of the most important prizes of the year because it is very different. It's a prize not given for the number of papers somebody has written or for the citation index or something else. It's a different objective. It's the objective to support activities which are important for the recognition of science by society and to strengthen its role to help dealing with the great challenges society is facing. And in the year of COVID, I don't have to explain why this is so important. We go through a time where, in fact, the relationship between science and society is very difficult in many cases, and where we realize that it is important that science is taken as an important source of information to deal in a rational way with the problem we are facing. Now, specifically, of course, we devised the prize not just to deal with COVID. I read from the charter that the Einstein Awards honors all activities of individuals as well as of institutions or organizations that enhance the rigor, the reliability, transparency of research, and stimulates awareness among researchers as well as among laypersons for measures to improve research quality and research integrity.
Thank you, Mr. Imboden. And with the trophy, there's a trophy to this award. Every award has a trophy. And with the Einstein Foundation Award, this is not an Oscar. It's not a fancy golden goblet, but it is a very, very special trophy. And we have a few pictures to show you the idea behind this trophy. The first picture, but this is not the person I'm going to talk about. I'm talking about Axel Kufus first. He has designed this trophy, and he's a professor at the Berlin University of the Arts. And you just saw Albert Einstein because Axel Kufus was inspired by these pictures of Albert Einstein writing with a piece of chalk on a blackboard. Chalk is the perfect tool to write down your ideas, because if you see that you've done a mistake, you can easily erase it and then correct yourself. And thus, the Einstein Foundation Award trophy is a simple piece of chalk, reminding us all of this virtue of improving quality by questioning results and correcting methods. And now it's time for the award itself. You already heard it. There's 3 categories to this prize. And we start off with the award, Einstein Foundation Award for Early Career Research. And we've got Dorothy Bishop with us again. Ms. Bishop, why is there a special category for young scientists? Why is that important?
I think it's important because they have been instrumental in pushing forward this agenda of really changing how we do research to improve its quality, with a load of quite original and innovative ideas. There has been really just tremendous grassroots interest. So often when you get some new innovation coming along, it's coming from the top down. It's, the head of the institution declares that we've all got to do something. When it comes to improving research, transparency, openness, reproducibility, inclusivity, you've got a horde of young people who are wonderful. They've got energy, they've got dynamism, and they're a huge enthusiasm for bringing about change. And I think that it's really important that we recognize that without them, the change isn't going to come. It's not going to come from the old people like me. We really need the new generation to embrace this kind of thing. So I think it's very, very fitting that we should have this.
And did you get a lot of applications for the award?
Yes, we were astounded and overwhelmed because we got a lot in terms of quantity, nearly 200, and also very high quality, which meant that we had quite a big job in trying to sift through them and identify a shortlist. It was encouraging to just see how many people there were, although disappointing, of course, that we can only award one prize.
Can you tell me something about this shortlist? There were 4 teams on it. Who were they?
Yes, there were 4 teams. We had Yuri Pavlov, who was the EEG Many Labs team, so with a project that was that is planning to really see how far, when you use measures of the electrical activity of the brain, which is widely used in neuroscience, which of these measures are robust, which should we be using, for example, as biomarkers or to study how the brain responds in different conditions. Such research has been going on a long time, but it does. We're really very uncertain about how much of it is robust and reliable because very often people have been doing small-scale research. And what these are this project plans to do is to get together a whole load of different research teams to really combine their forces, identify which are the really key results, and see which can be reproduced. And then the second on my list is Patrick Forscher. I think we may have a slide for him as well, who is from the Busara Center for Behavioral Economics in Nairobi, who's going to foster big team science to expand research in Africa. He has already made a start doing that. So the idea again is that we're far too often, and in his field, which is more social psychology and behavioral economics, but we're very often seeing studies that are just not representative, not just only not robust enough, but very much restricted to some populations of American undergraduates. So the idea is that it's really important that we expand our range and look more at a wider range of people. And he has the facilities to do that. And it's a very exciting idea to expand into Africa. And the third submission is a team, Jessica Cozy and Martin Zettersten from Princeton University. And again, the theme is very much scaling stuff up, getting teams of people working collaboratively so that you can really get a proper answer to some of the questions in the field here of infant development, where for many years researchers have studied how infants preferentially, if you give them two things to look at on a screen, whether they look more to one or to the other, and this relates quite often to how familiar the things are, and this can give you an idea of how they're processing things. But this has really been taken as a method that has been assumed, but not really very well understood. And so they are planning to do a greatly scaled up and again international collaboration called the Many Babies 5 project, building on previous work, which has really demonstrated the value of adopting this large-scale collaborative approach. And then the last project on my list, Danielle Peers and her team in Canada want to make research more inclusive, more reliable, and accessible by incorporating knowledge and insights from people with disabilities. And this is a project that is really focusing on the idea that people with disabilities have been very much excluded from research, often actually quite explicitly, or sometimes inadvertently by people being overprotective of them and thinking that, that they can't give consent, for example. And so this is a project that is very much designed to see whether we can move away from that and get people with disabilities at the center of research, of decision making, not just about research on people with disabilities, although it's needed there, but more broadly, and have them less as an excluded group.
Okay, that sounds like 4 very, very interesting projects. And the final winner of this category was just chosen this afternoon. Can you tell us who won that prize?
We had a very difficult discussion, as you can imagine, given the very high quality, because they were all strong, but in different ways. But in the end, after much pondering, we have decided that the winner is the project by Jessica Cozy and Martin Zettersten on Many Babies 5. And they are 2 postdoctoral research fellows from the University of Princeton.
And we've just very briefly already seen about 2 of them. I hope we see them now again. Congratulations.
Yes, and I even have a glass to raise.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the Einstein Foundation. Thank you.
This prize, this category is awarded with 100,000 euros, quite an amazing sum of money. I know it's an unfair question because you just got to know that you won this prize, but do you've got already any ideas of what to do with this money?
Yes, we do. So there's 2 main things that I think this money will help us accomplish. So one is whenever you're trying to organize this kind of large-scale collaboration that involves literally 100 labs across many countries working internationally, there's a lot of just organizational work that needs to be figured out along the way. And so one way that this money will help us is just by having funds to support some of that infrastructure that we need to build in order to make the project a reality. And the second thing that we're really excited about is really our main motivation for applying for the funding, which is that we think it'll help us expand who can actually contribute to the project. So in this case, we're thinking particularly of researchers with limited resources who are just starting up a lab, that sort of thing, where some startup funds will be really helpful for them to do the work in the first place. And then, part of it for us too is that, that money can also seed then new research that they might want to do. So help them to strike up in their own research directions.
Thank you, and good luck with your work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, good luck.
And now it's time for the next category, and I think we've got a little film again. The second category is the Institutional Award, and I'm happy to have Martin Rennert again with me, the chair of the Einstein Foundation. Mr. Rennert, why did you decide to have a special prize for an institution? I mean, most people work in institutions, don't they?
Well, I think it was a very wise decision of the jury to advise us to divide the prize into three categories. The first one you've just seen. Of course, we always think of individuals doing something special and all the work alone, but I do believe that you never can do that without the backing of an institution or the backing of a team, as we've just seen in the Early Career Researcher Award. I believe that institutions sometimes, which are also funded by nations, by states, by towns, by universities, whatever, that institutions sometimes can come together in order to address the problem that we also have seen. And that is why we've also had an institutional award. And I think that the institutional award is something which can also be justified by the same criteria that you could use with other things. We have these criteria. I can read them, a couple of them. There are quite a few. Actually, the jury adhered to these, but those were also the things we talked about. Substantial contributions to fostering research integrity through outstanding measures that increase the quality and reliability and reproducibility of research by improving transparency, access to research results, and overcoming the fragmentation of research. Team science is the key word there. It is also a criterion that we would want to have developed or implemented quality improving interventions, governance and policies. Another one, we have to have developed innovative approaches that foster research on research integrity. Research on research integrity. I want to make that clear. We have that conducted and designed novel measures or programs preventing misconduct and safeguarding validity and reliability in research and science. Well, I could go on and on, but of course these things have been addressed not only by individuals, but also by institutions. And I believe that that is something which we will come and see much more in the future.
And please tell us now, who is the winner in this category and why?
It is why, and it's going to be quite something to tell you. But actually, first the winner himself, or the institution actually, is my honor to tell you that the winner here is the awardee is the Center for Open Science, which is based in Charlottesville in Virginia in the United States. The Center for Open Science, COS abbreviated, its mission is to increase the openness, integrity, and reproducibility of scientific research. As I said before, it actually fits into the criteria marvelously. The center promotes these aims by coordinating and catalyzing communities and stakeholders to drive change in global culture and incentives that drive researchers' behavior, the infrastructure that supports the research, and the business models that dominate scholarly communication. And I think the Center for Open Science is represented by a person, Professor Brian Nosek, whom we'll see in a second. And I think the Center for Open Science has done a marvelous job in the last years.
Okay, we will see in a bit more than a second, because first of all, we've got a little film about the Center for Open Science.
Marvelous.
The idea for the Center for Open Science came out of recognizing that we have to tackle the system of how science works if we're going to change people's behaviors toward their ideals. When I was getting into science, I, like many others, thought that the process of science was one of pursuing your curiosity, trying to understand how things work, trying to investigate problems, share those results with others, and see what we could discover and learn. But I discovered that it does not. What I didn't expect was how much publication is the actual currency of advancement. And certain kinds of things are more publishable than others. But the hard part as a grad student was realizing as I was doing the work in the laboratory is that it's messy. There's lots of negative results. There's lots of things that don't quite fit together. And so the reward system was something that was very hard to achieve in the natural course of doing the research.
We have a theory of change, which is what really is the basis for the background for why we are using infrastructure as part of our theory of change. We also incorporate user-centric design principles that make the infrastructure usable for communities and researchers adopting these open practices. We then engage communities to support making these behaviors more normative. We then work with stakeholders to align the incentives for researchers to make these behaviors rewarding. And then finally work with policymakers to create policies that require and reinforce the behaviors to be adopted by researchers and communities.
We want to understand the current situation of how things are occurring, but also ways to improve that process to increase the efficiency. So a good example would be the reproducibility project in cancer biology. So this is a 7-year effort to replicate findings from high-impact cancer biology papers. There were challenges throughout the entire process: lack of information, lack of data sharing, code sharing. When we did replicate the results, we didn't find findings that were similar to the original findings. So this tells us that there's rooms to improve the process, and these papers will be published in December of this year.
Our primary goal for the Center for Open Science is to change the default from closed to open, so that standard practice is that a researcher will do their work and show you, the reader, how they got to the claims that they got to, so that you can reuse what they've done, you can challenge or question what they've done, or you can build on what they've done. And that will really accelerate science to maximize progress on knowledge, on solutions, and on treatments.
Congratulations, Mr. Nosek. That is fantastic. The institutional award is funded with 200,000 euros. Do you've got any upcoming priorities that might be supported by these awards fundings?
Yes, for sure. And first, let me say on behalf of the 45 members of the Center for Open Science and from our co-founder, Jeff Spies, and all of the other contributors to the center over the years, how grateful we are to the committee and the foundation for this award. We really understand and embrace the institutional nature of that award. Our organization exists to promote openness, integrity, and reproducibility of research. And the award itself will contribute in important ways to different parts of our mission. So, for example, in the infrastructure that Nikki described, one of the things that we are trying to improve now is the process of pre-registration, of committing in advance to what our plans are for the research that we're doing, how we'll analyze and report on that. And one of the things that happens in the daily work of doing research is change. Things happen differently than we expected or planned. And that's perfectly a reasonable thing to occur because science is complicated. But what we want to improve in the infrastructure is the ability to disclose and make transparent those changes as they happened so that the reader can understand how the research came to be what it was. A second key part of how this award will contribute to our broader work is in promoting the grassroots development of communities. And there are two key communities that we rely on for our success in collaborating and catalyzing their work. One is the reform community, and as Dorothy mentioned earlier, is largely based on early career researchers who are idealizing how we want science to be and trying to change the system and the structure of awards to be able to enact the values that they have. And so a key part for us is to work closely with those people, the people in these reform communities, to try to elevate and change research practices from bottom up. And a second community that is very important for our work is the meta-science research community, researchers who are studying the process of science itself to understand the current state of how research is operating, but also evaluate the effectiveness of interventions like the ones that we are pursuing to try to change how science operates. Are we meeting the benefits that we hypothesize these changes would make? And are there unintended impacts that might actually need to be changed or alter course if this isn't operating as ideally as we hoped? And then the final way that this award will help to contribute and advance our work is in promoting and advancing new norms in the policies that drive how journals and funders and institutions shape the behaviors of their authors, their grantees, and their employees. And that is particularly through a project we call the Top Factor, which is a rating of transparency policies by those different stakeholder groups. And we want to use this accumulating database of recording policies of these different stakeholders to help encourage new norms, to highlight the progressive actors in these spaces and use them as exemplars for those that have been a little bit slower to act, so that they may too follow their lead and start to increase the standards and expectations for higher rigor and greater transparency. So we are very grateful for this award because it will really help us accelerate and advance our mission.
Thank you, Mr. Nosek, and good luck with all your projects. And now it's time for the next category. The third category is the individual award, and it is my pleasure to have Dieter Imboden back again with me. Mr. Imboden, why do you think was it important, or why did you decide it is important to have a category for an individual person? I mean, no one works alone.
That's true, and certainly in many cases are, maybe just saw that with the institutional award, that people are working together and reach something which one person alone would not reach. But then there are the individuals. There are the people who swam against the current at the time when other people did not think about this kind of problem, as it is the case in our prize. And we are very happy that we have both this individual and this institutional prize. And of course, in many cases, there are mixtures in between. By the way, it's interesting, the Nobel Prize does not have the chance to give an institutional prize, so we can switch between the two possibilities. Then there are clear-cut cases where a single person has done something at the time which was very early, has suffered or has sacrificed to a certain extent the personal scientific career in order to achieve and improve the work and the achievement of science. And that's why the individual award is a very important, probably the most important prize we have among the three of them.
Then please tell us who is the winner in this category.
The winner is a physicist, and I'm proud to say so because I'm a physicist myself. And he's from Cornell University, and his name is Paul Henry Ginsparg. Now, Paul Henry Ginsparg, in 1991, 30 years ago, has created at the time when the internet was not yet invented, has created or founded the first preprint archive called Archive. And to understand why this was important, we have to remember how it was when you were preparing a scientific paper. You wrote the paper, you had to send it to a journal, it had been reviewed, and it was maybe stocking for more than 1 year or 2 years. And in this time, your results were somehow secret, and the scientific community did not have a chance to build on what you have found already, or maybe also to contradict your opinion. And that's why a reprint or a preprint, a preprint archive accelerated the distribution of scientific knowledge and improved its reliability.
Thank you. And now we've got a little film again about Paul Ginsparg.
I started the system that became known as Archive in 1991. I was originally expecting about one every 3 days. After the first 6 months, instead of 50, there were about 500 submissions. Peer review, as we now use it, is largely a post-World War II construct. When a scientist writes an article, they send it to a journal for publication, and an editor has to make a decision on some principled basis, which by peer review means they send it out to other experts in the field who look at it, and sometimes it can take a few months, sometimes it can take 6 months to a year or longer. Back then, disk space on accounts was very limited, so it became natural to think about having some kind of central repository. The other clear issue was that there was something unfair about a system where there was a privileged loop where people in the know were passing around this information and benefiting from it, whereas people out of this privileged loop at second-tier institutions or abroad were not able to benefit from these communication channels. By around 2008, there were a grand total of about 500,000 submissions. In 2014, we hit 1 million total submissions, and now 7 years after that, we're about to hit 2 million submissions by the end of this year. And so it's been a story of continuous growth. The biggest benefit is the way it accelerates research. You have a global community in some ways operating like a collective organism. It has the additional benefit that people are able to stake priority claims. And so we like to think that if we are responsible for some new development, it's because we worked harder, we were more inspired, but not because we had prior access to information that was only of limited availability. So it's democratizing the research enterprise in that sense. It's still very satisfying to have this as a legacy where people can point to this one event and say, yeah, that had a marked impact on the 30 years that followed.
And now it's my pleasure to welcome Paul Ginsparg. Congratulations.
Thank you. I apologize. I was unmuted and started laughing when I saw myself bicycling through that wonderful sculpture.
I think everything's fine. This award is funded by 200,000 euros. Do you've got already any ideas of what to do? So how can you use this money to achieve your goals? What are you planning to do?
Well, yeah, I have to say that I don't spend a lot of time thinking in advance about the unlikely event that some interesting sum of money will drop in my lap like manna from heaven. So and moreover, after receiving this call from Martine, I spent about 3 weeks meticulously planning logistics. Would have loved to have come to Berlin. It would have been my first airplane flight in over a year and a half, but how do you say, es war nicht zu sein, leider. And then for the past week, I've been meticulously undoing all of those. So I haven't had a lot of time to think about how to spend it. My family thinks that I should finally break down and buy a cell phone. But, looking at what most people do with them, I think I prefer to benefit from being off the grid a little longer. But more seriously, I will say that the last 3 semesters have been fairly grueling. I've been engaged in my usual teaching, administration, and research activities. And the teaching, I've been teaching machine learning and quantum computing. I've been trying to compensate in whatever way possible for the students who've frankly been far more disruptive than I have during this period. But one possibility that's very tempting is to think of some way to take stock of everything that's happened over the past 30 years. It's been a wonderful trip, and it remains incredibly gratifying to hear from a new generation of researchers, which shockingly, wasn't even born when the system was created, about the impact it continues to have on their daily life. And so to look at how things have evolved over the next 30 years, and if I get lucky enough even to start thinking about how to architect something for the next 30 years. And so, possibly fund a gap year or figure out some fun way of surveying what's going on, and use the resources as they were intended to continue supporting the research effort and the infrastructure behind research.
Thank you, Mr. Ginsberg, and good luck with your work and with your fund.
Just to say one other thing, because the question came up about let's see, what other thing first, because pedagogy is what I do for a living. In the introduction, it said 1991 was before the internet. And I always explain to my students there's a difference between the internet and the World Wide Web. And while it was before the World Wide Web, it was not before the internet. We were already on the internet for many years at that point. But the point I wanted to make about the individual versus the institution is it is important to mention that I benefited from being at Los Alamos National Lab for the first 10 years, which provided the work environment which supported an open-ended project like this. And as well, Cornell University has both hosted and continued to support it for the last 20 years. And maybe an event like this will actually convey to the upper administration that they're involved in something important, which hasn't always been obvious to them.
Thank you, Mr. Ginsberg. And thanks to all awardees again. And thank you to all the applicants to this award. You will be able to meet all the awardees of this year, next year in autumn, when we have the next Einstein Foundation Award ceremony, hopefully in present in Berlin, together with the winners of the 2022 Einstein Award. And the call for the next Einstein Foundation Award, now if you've got curious and want to apply, is going to open soon. So you can soon apply for the next year's award. And I thank you again for all of you. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and I hope you have a good evening. Goodbye. I guess we're done.